Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. Wednesday, happy hump day. We have a very interesting conversation that sparked by, I guess the NBA sparked it, and then Ari, you had the idea. How many teams are going to win the national title over the next 10 years? Because the NBA has had 7 unique champions in 7 years. And you and I have been hammering everybody over the head with, we think that the NIL transfer portal era is going to make things a little more even in terms of being able to win a national title in football. So we are going to talk about all of this.
Yeah, I've gotten 2 good podcasting ideas this week, and neither of them came in the shower. So that's the upset of the week.
Yeah,
on the
I'm
show.
excited
About this because there's 2 parts of the discussion, Andy. It's how many teams in totality will win in the next 10 years, and who do we think will or can. And we were discussing it over text, the 3 of us, yesterday, and I think the difference between who will and who can is pretty stark. And I think that you and I probably have some disagreements about that. So I want to go through all the.
See, I don't think it's that stark. Like I don't think there's a big a difference at all. I think there was a huge difference before between who can and will.
See, I think that
if you can, there's a good chance you will now. Like,
I mean, there's been a lot
before where
can in the past that didn't even come close. Like, does Texas A&M can win a national title? Will they? Those are 2 very different.
But I don't think you could have said they can win one in the old era. I mean, maybe you could have, but
I think that there were probably 15 programs that in the old era that had a national championship ceiling. Like, for instance, you live in Gainesville. You're familiar with Florida. What's Florida's program ceiling? Can they win one in the next 10 years? Absolutely. Will they? Very different proposition to me.
Yeah, but it's a lot different proposition than when Alabama and Ohio State were dominating everything and getting all the best recruits. Like, the can they is a lot easier now to translate to will they than it was before.
I mean, I guess so. I mean,
that's the whole point of the conversation, Ari.
No. I mean, I don't know. I'm not on the same team as you here. I really.
Oh, I know.
Think
so you still think it's going to be the same 4 or 5 teams? Nothing's going to change.
No, I think that something will change. I think there are teams that have a national championship ceiling who are closer to being there than other teams that have national championships. For instance, Oregon has never won one.
Right.
Oregon, in my opinion, will win one in the next 10 years. I don't know if I would sit back and say Texas A&M will win one, even though I think both programs have the same ceiling.
That's fair.
I see that distinction. That's all I'm trying to say. Like, I do think that there are new teams that have like Penn State's national championship ceiling exists, and I still think that it did exist in the 2014 to 22 era. Do I think they're actually going to go out and win it all? I'm hesitant to say that, but that doesn't mean I don't think
they're closer to it than they were before.
They are closer to it, and let's. This is the whole podcast, so if we're
we're going to get into this because we've got a couple little news nuggets to talk about before we get into this, and one that sort of segues into it too. But let's table that for a second because it is very interesting, and I think there's a lot of fans that are looking at this and going, "Okay, this is my program's chance." I think the barrier to entry is lower into getting into the from can they to will they. We'll find out how many teams actually can, but it's going to be interesting. And for comparison's sake, we just mentioned, the NBA had 7 unique champions in 7 years, which is very, very unusual. Like even the NFL, which has all these, rules in place to enforce parity, hasn't been close to that recently. You've had the Chiefs win multiples. You've had the Eagles win multiples. So 11 seasons of the CFP, 6 different programs have won the national title. Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan. LSU and Michigan are the only one time in there. So we'll see. But that is going to be a fun discussion. Before we get to that, though, very interesting piece of news on Tuesday, Ari. Ryder Lyons from Folsom, California, 5-star quarterback in the class of 2026, though not technically a class of 2026 guy, even though he's officially one. Ryder Lyons is going to BYU. Chose BYU over Oregon. Announced it on the Pat McAfee show on Tuesday. Now, you've said this. We had this discussion with our friend Matt Brown a few weeks ago. You've said, how does BYU not just turn on the NIL faucet to promote the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and have the best football team in America? Well, they just got a quarterback everybody wants.
Yeah, I mean, this is the perfect. They've threaded the needle perfectly here because they got a 5-star quarterback who's also Mormon.
Yes, so this is different than AJ DeBanson, the basketball recruit, the number 1 basketball recruit, not LDS, going to BYU. Ryder Lyons is LDS. So, like, this was they offered him when he was 14 years old. They have been trying to get him for a long time.
Yeah, and I think that at the very least, because the BYU discussion has really gone off the rails on the show, and if you've been a part of it, you know what we're talking about. But my theory has always been that since the LDS church is worth billions of dollars, that they could just turn on the money spigot and pay everybody. But I think that the baseline expectation, if I'm a BYU fan, is that at least go get the best Mormon players. So, like, we talk about lifestyle and, religious restrictions. And, frankly speaking, I don't know Ryder Lyons personally or how he carries out his life, but the expectations in the student conduct code at BYU might be too stringent for even LDS people. Like, not everybody.
Dad and both sisters went there.
Yeah,
so I think they're pretty familiar with how it works.
But I'm not even saying with just him. I'm just saying in general, not everybody, even people of the faith, want to live that closely to the guidelines. I don't know how it is in Mormonism, but Judaism, there's definitely a arc of how observant you are, and based on how observant you are, that is restrictive of your life. So, but yes, I think that this is exactly where you start if you're BYU, right? You go get the 5-star quarterback who is observant of your faith and is very familiar with your university and culture, because that's kind of the entire point. Now, I don't know how many Ryder Lyons exist. I mean, their current quarterback is of the Jewish faith. So, like, we know that building a 85-man roster of just only LDS players probably isn't a reasonable proposition. But when there are no doubt about it guys at the most important position, you have to go grab them. And I think the thing that's so funny about the discourse that we're going to be having later on the show is that the teams that have an opportunity both in the NFL and college to actually win the whole thing are typically the teams that have the best quarterbacks, right? I mean, even if you look at like what the NFL spread in comparison to the college spread, the reason why it's not that much different is because the greatest quarterback on earth exists, and they won 3 in Kansas City, right? So it's very quarterback reliant. And this is a huge monumental get. And I think that maybe it's a shame we have to wait a few years because he's taking his mission and he's not actually going to enroll until 2 years from now. But that this is how you build that program.
He explained the process on the McAfee show, by the way. So he puts in his paperwork in August, and then a few weeks later, they're like, okay, you're going to, and it could be anywhere in the world. Like, it could be Australia. Yeah. It could be Brazil. It could be just anywhere. So that is exciting and scary at the same time, I would think.
Yeah, it's like the NFL draft, but for missions. It's like you don't know where your job's going to be for the next few years. For a year. It would be an interesting thing. And, kudos to him for, putting his faith first and, prioritizing that. I don't understand, why they can't delay it. Some people do, some people don't. But the people who go right away come back and are typically successful. And I think part of the reason why BYU has been so successful in the recent past is because a lot of their rosters tends to be older, more physically advanced people too, right? So maybe that can be an advantage.
Well, they also just got Bear Bachmeier as a transfer from Stanford. So, and we'll see what happens with Retzlaff, because obviously there are other issues right now with Jake Retzlaff. So we'll see what happens going forward there. But they did just bring in Bear Bachmeier this right recently, because I believe he did spring practice at Stanford and then transfer to BYU. So they've got a bridge there to Ryder Lyons. And the way BYU structured it a lot with the missions over the years is, now sometimes they would have a guy come in and redshirt at BYU for a year, then take a mission, then come back, and he comes in as a redshirt freshman, but is 3 years out of high school. And that allowed, especially with the linemen, allowed them to be much more physically mature and older, wiser, all that good stuff. It's a little bit different in this day and age. I think he's going to go on the mission. He's going to serve the mission and then come to school. And this is a person who I would assume Ryder Lyons feels like he's got an NFL future. So, he would have to ball out and make that decision, pretty quickly.
Yeah. And the thing that I like about him, and I don't know, what his actual ceiling is in college, but the fun thing about him is that he plays like a psychopath, and I mean that in a complimentary way.
In the nicest possible way.
Off the walls and, really exciting. And I feel like that's like the exact type of offense that could, or player that could lead an offense in the Big 12 that could do some stuff. So, I don't know about accuracy and timing and holding on to the ball too long. I think that every, analyst or recruiting expert has different opinions on how far along he is in his game, but at the very least in the Big 12, somebody who can, escape pressure. You're watching these highlights here and step into the pocket, make people miss, run, throw. I mean, it's a really exciting proposition for BYU, and I'm excited to see if this, turns on an enthusiasm to try to build a real roster around him for 27, 28, and see what can happen there in Provo.
So you talked to Ryder Lyons at OT7 in Dallas, and you actually asked him then about BYU, because obviously BYU was coming after him hard. Here's what he said.
Being of the LDS faith, having a tie with BYU, a program that's coming after you hard, you could be somebody that changes the trajectory of that program in a massive way, because BYU, though a very good program that pushed for a playoff spot last year, hasn't had a player like this come through.
Yeah.
Like, how much of a pool is your faith, and how much of a connection do you feel as somebody of that faith to lift up a program that embodies it?
It's hard for sure. I'm super familiar with it. Both my parents went there, my sisters went there, so I definitely understand it all. And yeah, it is. I could. It's hard. I could do that and change the program. Start a new wave of sort, but I also have to do what's best for me.
Yeah.
I have to look at everything. I'm not just going to make a decision without really knowing what I want to do. Like, once I commit to a school, it's really,
but it's like, on one hand, it's like football and all the things that are about football, and then the other one's just like bigger than football.
Yeah.
But
which is a big part for me.
Truth is, their starting quarterback's Jewish. So, you don't have to be LDS to go there.
So he took this one over Oregon. Now, the Deseret News reported that the Oregon offer was higher. It's interesting. Now, we've entered a period of recruiting, Ari, where we don't actually get to see what these financial offers are. But according to everybody, pretty much nobody ever takes the highest offer. It's always funny to me.
Have you noticed that? Yeah.
So-and-so offered more. It wasn't his highest offer.
In every June,
it's
for
okay
the rest
if it
of our
is.
lives, we're going to have to hear about good players who didn't transfer and how they could have. That's the other thing I've noticed too. It's like, oh yeah, look, player returns to school even though he had a $9 million offer from somewhere else because he has pride in what he's building there. Like, that's the June story arc, right?
Yeah.
So and I'm not saying that's not true, but it's going to be true for everybody who says it's true with no verification whatsoever, right? So you know how I feel about it. We've talked about this a lot.
I don't really care if BYU offered more money than Oregon.
Yeah, I wish that they would.
Doesn't really bother me one bit.
If you were a BYU fan, wouldn't you almost rather them have offered more?
I guess. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like, make a competitive offer and then let the person weigh the options. And that's what happened here. I would imagine that BYU, we don't know what the numbers are, but BYU's offer and Oregon's offer, I'd imagine, were both very competitive. So
if I'm a BYU fan, I'm pretty excited about the fact that my program ponied up the money to be competitive with Oregon, competitive enough to win. Because I think that the NIL compensation and the way that he put it in that interview, we don't have that clip, but if you want to go watch it, you just type in, Ryder Lyons into YouTube with my name and it'll come up. Was that, like, he was very forthcoming about importance of NIL and financial stability and how much it matters to people like him, and why people shy away from acknowledging and talking about it is because they don't want to be perceived as soft or perceived as, a bad person who only, prioritizes money. It's good that BYU is paying him. enough to get him to go there. And, I understand too that loyalty to a faith or loyalty to a family lineage, having, parents and siblings who went there is all really important. And maybe that gives them a discount. But I promise you one thing, BYU ponied up money to get him there, because if they didn't, he wouldn't be going. He's got a huge social media following. I think he's got a massive TikTok following, all of which is designed to, build brand and encourage, compensation, and good for him. That's what I would be doing if I were him. So, I guess it's a badge of honor that you got somebody who loves your school so much that they don't want to take the most possible money. But I personally don't want to be a fan of a program that has to go bargain hunting and hoping that people will take discounts. I want my program to pony up and do what it takes financially to put me in a position to do it. Is that a fair thought?
Hey, I just had a great sponsorship idea, Ari. Can we sponsor? Can we have? We'll put the word out, and we'll give multiple companies a chance to bid on it. But here's what I'm envisioning: the TJ Maxx Trophy for the team that did the best bargain hunting.
Yeah.
But probably didn't win the national title.
Yeah. I want JG Wentworth. 877 cash now. It's my money and I want it now. That's my kind of sponsorship.
Well, this is gonna be fun to watch. Ryder Lyons, we're gonna find out, I guess, in August or September where he's gonna go, and then he's gonna be off the grid per se for a while, because when you're serving a mission, that is your full-time job. So you
ever watch
hear back from him when he returns.
You ever watch Beachfront Bargain Hunt?
Have you ever watched that? Yes.
Show? Where they're condos for $120,000 in front of the ocean?
Yes.
I don't think anybody who's buying the $120,000 beachfront condo is going to get the national championship that comes with living in South Beach.
Right. So BYU,
yeah.
But BYU seems to be willing to spend that South Beach money.
Yeah.
We've seen it in basketball. Now we're seeing it in football. So it'll be interesting. By the way,
the water's always brown in that show, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that.
Ryder Lyons, great quarterback name. And his decision puts another great quarterback name into play. Bryson Beaver, who had been committed to Boise State, but has since reopened his recruitment. Bryson Beaver is probably the next hard target of the Oregon Ducks now that Ryder Lyons is off the board, but he's got some SEC schools after him too. So from Ryder Lyons to Bryson Beaver, here we go.
I mean, if a Beaver went to Oregon, that would be quite hilarious, wouldn't it?
That would be hysterical.
Yeah.
All right. This show is sponsored by Rhoback. I am wearing my Rhoback Performance Polo right now.
Andy, I wore mine on the golf course the other day. It was amazing.
I was about to say it is the polo you can take from the office to the golf course to the bar, and you're going to feel right at home in all those places with your Rhoback Performance Polo. But also you've got your hoodies. You know how I feel about my performance hoodies. The Q-zips, the joggers, the butter soft joggers, shorts, you name it, they got it all. Rhoback.com, RHOBACK. Use the code Andy for 20% off your first order. That's Rhoback.com, RHOBACK. Load up for the summer with Rhoback. 20% off your first order with the code Andy. All right, Ari. So we just talked about BYU going after Ryder Lyons, not spending beachfront bargain hunt money, spending, I don't even know what show. I think there a South Beach real estate show had to. You watch all those shows.
Yeah, I love those shows. Why don't you just watch $1 million listing, and then that's that. That's I know you get upset when I say the water is brown, but there are different criterias of what a real beachfront.
No, listen, you're not getting $120,000 beachfront condo unless the water's brown. Unless the water is clear blue, it's going to cost more.
Yeah, there are levels to beachfront to me. But yes, also too, I would live in a $120,000 condo with brown water. I'm sure it's nice, but you're not. It's not a bargain. You're getting what the thing is worth.
But all the programs we're about to start talking about are $1 million listing type programs. They're the ones that can afford the prime properties, because these are programs that can win national titles, but will they win national titles? And it's an important distinction. But all right, we talked about this yesterday briefly, and I've had a little more chance to think about it. And you asked me this question: how many different programs in the next 10 years will win the national title? And then we kind of went back and forth. It was 6 in the last 11, so 6 since the playoff has started. I think it's going to be more than 6. I do think there's probably a repeat champ in there. I'm going to say 8 in the next 10 years.
I will say 7.
Okay, so we got to figure out what those programs are.
We got to figure out 7 or 8 programs. We might not agree on all of them. Maybe we'll get to 10, and then yours will be different than mine.
Well, I think we will get to 10. All right, why don't we before we get to that? If you're watching on Twitter right now, go to the tweet below, click on the YouTube link, come to YouTube. You need to be watching this show on YouTube because that is the best way to watch it. The chat is popping off as usual.
And we acknowledge
we got a little FSU Miami argument in the chat today. Very fun.
They help drive the show. Like if you have something to say or want to enjoy or engage in the conversation, like we look at it and read it the whole time and reference it constantly. So thanks for being here for those that are on YouTube, and hopefully you'll be joined by some new friends here shortly. But yes, let's get into it, Andy.
All right. So the ones that I feel like we're going to agree on: Ohio State, which just won and hadn't won in 10 years. So maybe that's a mistake. But the way they recruit, I feel like we should leave them there. Georgia, I feel like we should leave there because of the way they recruit.
Yep.
Alabama. Does Alabama belong there?
I believe they do.
I still think they're recruiting in that way. Texas, we feel like is close, right?
I think Texas is the one that I feel second best good about.
Okay.
Is that crazy?
No, I don't think that's crazy. I mean, look at the trajectory they are on. They gave Ohio State the toughest challenge in the playoff last year.
I think they're going to do it this year. So, like, I think that they're knocking. You know, your knocking thing. They've been knocking for a while. They're going to break through. Yeah.
So we've got 4 right now. Who else you got on here?
Okay, so I have a few that I am iffy on, but I think that LSU should probably be on the list. No,
I agree. LSU has won a national title in each of the decades this century. They've won 3 national titles this century. They strike me as the kind of program where even if Brian Kelly's not the guy, like by 2035, they're going to have won another national title.
Yes, because the decade starts right now. And like a decade is a long time. Like LSU always has a way of figuring it out.
Right. And it's one of those, like, there's all that talent in Louisiana. They're still the biggest draw. Like, even in this era, you should be able to produce a national champion quality roster every few years at LSU. So, yeah, I think that I'm fine with them being on the list. That's 5. So, what's next for you?
Okay. So, I have 6 I wrote down 6 for sure.
Okay.
And I think we have more than
one more of those on your 6.
I don't know if I can't remember if we mentioned this. I'm sorry, but Oregon is on my list.
Okay. So, I'm good with Oregon. I am good with Oregon. Now, interestingly enough about Oregon does not have a national title in its history. If Oregon wins a national title, it will be the first-time national champion since Florida in 1996. That's how hard it is to join this club.
Yes, and they've been a game away once.
They've been in the national title game twice. So, and then obviously last season,
yes, twice.
They were the number 1 seed. They had the best regular season.
Last time they were in the national title game was 14, right?
Right, but they were closer when they played against Auburn, when it was Chip Kelly against Cam Newton.
Yeah. So I said 7. My list of bona fide wills, like I feel like they will, is Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Oregon, LSU. Everybody else is up for discussion to me.
Okay.
Is there anybody else on your list that you are adamant will be a will?
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is my 7th. And
I think Notre Dame is going to break through here in the next 10 years. If they keep on the trajectory they're on, I like that they've created this, we are the place you go to become a badass offensive lineman. Like, if you're going to have a brand, that's the brand to have, because that gives you the highest possible floor. And then, do you get the right skill guys? Do you get the right quarterback around them? But I think when you start there, it's a great place to start.
Also went on a recruiting tear in the last month, of which Notre Dame has rarely, if ever, seen in the modern era. Maybe the best recruiting run that we've seen from them. And like the whole thing about them with Marcus Freeman is that they were able to recruit at a higher level. Now, it took a little bit of time to get there, right? Like, I think people thought there would be an instant boost into the top 6 once Brian Kelly left. But now that you have testimony and proof of concept, a team that made it all the way to the national title game last year, I think Notre Dame is going to have an easier time selling their coach, who's very likable and very handsome, which we've joked in the past matters.
So handsome.
And yes, so Notre Dame is 7th on my list. And when I said 7, there is a group of teams that I think are vying for that unexpected title, because there will be one unexpected title, right? Not in the next 10 years.
What was the unexpected title of the last
Michigan.
of the last Michigan? Okay.
Yeah. It's not even close. Yeah. Michigan won a national championship in a year in which I thought it was impossible for them to win it in August. To me, that's the most unexpected. I think that Michigan changed and showed that a new type of team could win in the playoff era. They were the first of their kind. And if Michigan would have lost to Washington, then Washington would have been the answer. Both of those teams playing for the national championship in the talent era was an absolute stunner to me. And had to rewire my brain on what was even possible in the sport. To me, it was, who are the top 6 teams in terms of most talent? Those will be one of the 6 will be there. Michigan, I think, was closer to being in that from a experience and in production standpoint, but on paper, they weren't in that club. So Michigan is
okay. I'm putting Michigan on my list of can and possibly will. They're firing the money cannon at Michigan. If you the folks at MGO blog came up with the money cannon years ago, and it was a joke amongst all of them about, hey, all these other programs, buy players. We've got really rich alums. How come we don't do that? And it was very tongue-in-cheek. But now that you can actually do that, they are actually doing that. And they seem to figure that part out.
Yeah. So Michigan, I think, is really an interesting one. And I just want to make sure we have the foundation of the show set. Like, I am 100% adamant that Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, Texas, Oregon, and LSU will win one in the next, will win one in the next 10 years. Are you in agreement with that in terms of being adamant about those 6?
Yes, those are the ones for me that are the most obvious, have the most advantages. But here's why I put Michigan on the list.
But the thing I want to do is
Michigan may be recruiting at their level or higher as this 10-year period goes on.
But I want to draw a line in the sand with you, because those are my 6. I don't have any other that I'm adamant about, not even Notre Dame. Do you have a 7th that you're adamant about? Or
I'm not adamant, but I'm not adamant because the whole point of this is there's going to be ones that we are not really sure about.
I know, but your number was higher than mine in terms of how many you thought would win it, so I didn't know.
So I've named 8 already that I think can win it. And I have more that I think can win it.
Right, but I have a list of 15 that can. I have a list of
what I'm saying is the world has changed to the point that, and look, Michigan just won it. So don't act like that's a crazy thought.
I'm not.
Michigan is now recruiting at a higher level than it did when it won it.
Michigan is on my list. All I'm trying to do is establish what the difference between will and can. I got my 6 of
All right, we don't know who will. And that's the point.
No, we're doing a podcast. You have to come up with your teams that will.
I'm going to. But what I'm saying is I'm more sure about these than you are, apparently, because I think a bunch more teams enter the will category or can get from can to will than in the past.
Okay.
Because like,
I'm just going to be more stern about it, though. I'm just going to say I have 6
fine.
that will, and here are the 10 others that may.
National champs for everybody, for me. Because I don't know, because now, as we've said over and over again, the curve is flatter.
Yeah.
So, like, I
Michigan
feel very
won the
confident
national
about
title in
Michigan.
2 years, but I'm saying as I sit here in the seat on June 25th, 2025, here are the 6 teams that I'm adamant will eventually win.
Cool. We're
10.
done with that. We're continuing to podcast. There is a longer show, and we need to talk about more teams.
But I don't even feel like I know what your stance is. If your list is here's 15 that can, because that's not what we're doing.
It is what we're doing. Because it's more. So if you don't think it's more, if you say it's going to be 6 again, then the world hasn't changed at all, and that's your stance.
I think that these 6 will, and there will be 2 other surprises, which is the second tier that we're talking about.
Okay.
Now. I didn't know who had a top tier. That's all I'm trying to identify.
Okay. We agreed on the 6.
Okay, so you agree with me on the 6. It was a long way of getting there, but we got there. That's all I wanted to know, is if you had a 7th that would be in your top tier.
Notre Dame and Michigan, 7 and 8.
Okay, those are your tiers.
Golly.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
All right. Next group. So your group is 6, my group is 8.
Okay.
Okay.
There's the line.
Next group. Penn State.
Okay.
I think they have to do some stuff. Like, here's why I put Michigan in that one group and Penn State in this other group. Not just because Michigan won 2 years ago. Michigan has adjusted its recruiting so that I think in the next 2-3 years, we're going to view Michigan's recruiting on the same plane that we do Ohio State's and Georgia's and Alabama's and LSU's. And so I think that's why Penn State to this point has not done that. They recruit at a very high level, but not quite where those other ones are.
I think I could buy that. So here's the thing with Michigan for me. Michigan won a national title 2 years ago, doing it in a way that was different from everybody else, right? They did a really, really good job of talent evaluation. They also sprinkled in enough 5-star prospects to be difference makers. J.J. McCarthy, Will Johnson, and there are a few other 5-stars.
You can't even name the running back because he had such a bad year last year after being on the cover. Donovan Edwards.
Yeah, my bad. He was on the cover of the video game. His name was escaping me for a minute. But they had 5-star players at crucial spots who were difference makers. So they had a great blend of production, and they did a great job in the transfer portal. That, to me, is the perfect equation for competing in the new era, right? Mm-hmm. So the question for me with Michigan has always been, do you think that Michigan has to change how they did it 2 years ago in order to? And I don't think.
Well, I think they've already changed it. I think they're adding more of the high-end guys.
They did change it, but they didn't have to, which makes them more likely to win it to me. So, like, if they would have still done it the Harbaugh way, that would have been good. Now, the interesting thing to me is that Michigan signed the number 6 overall class in the On3 industry rankings last year, which is an error that you're discussing that they weren't really at. So if Michigan is going to sign the top 6 class year over year, then they 100% belong in this.
I think that's where we're headed. I do think that's where it's headed. And it just seems like that's become a priority there. And
now they need to have a really good finish in 2026 because they only have one top 100 player right now in their class ranks 20.
Their next couple weeks are about to get popping. If you're following Steve Wiltfong, it's about to go.
But if you think that they're going to be in the 3 to 8 range in the recruiting rankings every year, then they belong on this tier, and that's the distinction that you're making that Penn State hasn't hit yet.
Right, and I think Michigan is headed that direction. Penn State, we don't know yet, but it's possible. And I think this year's a great example of that. Did the Penn State portal acquisitions this year? Because Penn State had a lot that had recruited out of high school and developed, but there were some the one position group, wide receiver specifically, glaring holes. Did Penn State fill those holes adequately? Is Penn State willing to spend the money to fill holes adequately when it has them? Maybe they are. And maybe that puts them on that plane too.
Yeah, well, the thing that's so funny to me is that Penn State's closer this year. Like, I put out my projected playoff bracket with the straight seeding on Monday, and I got a lot of comments from people saying, where's Michigan? And it's like, that's not where I'm at with Michigan coming into this year. I don't know if that's where you are, but that's not where I am. Like, Penn State,
Michigan's got to prove something this year. We don't know what their offense is going to look like. No, Penn State is a much more finished product right now.
Penn State could theoretically win the national title like this year.
This year, yes. So I have another one in this group that could win it this year too.
Yeah. So, like, for me, it's funny. You have champions that weren't in that list of 6 from the previous decade, or teams that weren't on that list that could be one of the top 5 favorites to win it this year, which would be Texas and Penn State would be the 2. Michigan, I think, is probably a year away from being great again, but who knows? You know how important it is to get a quarterback, and if their quarterback, if Underwood comes out throwing darts and they look completely different, it's not out of the question to think that Michigan can make the playoff. I just don't know that in June that the rational thought for us should be that Michigan will make the playoff this year.
Oh, no. I mean, they're coming off a 7-5 season. They're probably starting a true freshman quarterback. Like, improvement is all you're really looking for this year. If they make the playoff, that's great.
And who's to say, too, like, that's the interesting part of this conversation. I think this is the major part of your point, too, is that, like, the next Jordan Addison could transfer to Michigan in 2 years, and there's no way to see that coming, right? Like, we don't know who they're going to have. But if Bryce Underwood shows great promise this year, they sign another top 10 class.
Yeah.
The top 6 class that they signed a year ago matures another year, and they bring in 2 or 3 really good transfers. They could win the national title in 2027. Like that, and that's why maybe I'm wrong about my 6.
Can I add another one to Penn State? Because I think these two are kind of in the same boat where they feel like very finished products right now, and both have very veteran quarterbacks. Both have loaded defenses. And one has the other team's defensive coordinator from last year. Yes, Clemson's the one I'm talking about. Clemson and Penn State feel like they are both potential national title winners this year. Whether that can be sustained over the next few years, we'll see. But if Dabo is pleased with how this worked this offseason, with a very limited dip the toe in the transfer portal, perhaps he looks at it and goes, well, now I have a few more holes because I had a lot of good veterans leave. Now maybe I'm going to add a little bit more out of the portal, but in the same way. I'm fascinated to see what happens with Clemson.
When you become addicted to something or you try something for the first time and it feels really good, and me as a human being, I always want more of that thing. That's my number one issue in life, I think, Andy. Like, I'm a more person.
Everything is crystal meth to you?
Yeah, like gambling amounts, more. Pizza, more. Drinks when I'm out, more. Possessions, more. Everything is more. I'm never enough. Like, I'm not one of these. I marvel at people who have 2 slices of pizza and go, I'm good. Like, I don't know how those people exist. But the thing that I think will be interesting is whether or not, like let's say Will Helt, like, is a All-American.
Yeah.
In
This is defensive end they got from Purdue. Yeah.
He popped the 3 milligrams in, and he might be smoking cigarettes a year from now. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. But like, it's that's the thing that I think is the most important distinction that I've just repeatedly tried to make about Clemson the last 3 years. And we're going to have a whole Clemson preview next week. But the fact that Clemson isn't in the top 6 for us is a actual proof that their program has declined to a certain degree, right? Because 5 years ago, Clemson would have been unequivocally on our list.
But remember, Clemson didn't really do it the way Ohio State and Alabama did it. Clemson did get some elite level recruits, but a lot of those 2 national titles were built around 2 generational quarterbacks that hit.
Why is Clemson not on your initial top 6 if you're not still in question of whether or not their talent accumulation plan is right? Like, why wouldn't you have them in the
because
top?
They don't consistently they don't have top 5 recruiting classes consistently.
But they didn't have top 5 recruiting classes consistently when they were at the top of the sport. And if
that's
we were
what I mean. It's very
19,
quarterback dependent at that point.
No, I know, but if we were doing this exercise in 19 or 20, Clemson would absolutely be in the top 6. So what changed is what I'm trying to get to you.
We would have been going on recency bias, but not on. Clemson didn't do it the way the other ones did it.
Right. I love this stat. I want to get it tattooed on my back. But in the 20-year period between the 2000s and 2020, there were only 3 teams that won a national championship, having not signed one top 5 class in the previous 4 years. And you know this because I've asked you 19 times on the show, but 2 of them were Clemson and 1 was Auburn with Cam. All of them had transcendent quarterbacks, and I know, but Clemson also, too, in the 2017, 18, 19 classes, saw a major uptick in recruiting results in high school to help them get to that next level. So that's what I would have been going off of. I wouldn't be going off of recency bias. I'd be like, well, they just did it twice, and now they're recruiting at a higher level to make this more sustainable.
But now they're not. So we're dealing with
they downgraded in my mind because they're not doing the recruiting part, and they weren't for the most part predominantly engaged in the portal.
But they may have put together a roster this year that can do it. And I think we may be getting back into windows as opposed to you are Alabama, you have Nick Saban, you are dominant. You are Georgia, you have Kirby Smart, you are dominant. Windows. It may be that there are windows now.
Windows is a good way. Yeah, like the windows. And the thing is that do you think there will be a point in time where Georgia and Ohio State go to the windows, or do you still think that there are certain programs that are immune to that?
I don't think anybody's immune to it anymore. Like Ohio State's going to be interesting this year because they should still be very good. And obviously, we've said a million times, they have the best returning offensive player and the best returning defensive player in the country. But they have so many new starters that we don't know what they're going to be. We assume they're going to be good because they recruited at a high level. But we don't know if they're going to take how big of a step back they might take from what they were last year, or if at all.
A huge step back from what they were last year. That's a guarantee. The question is whether or not they're taking a big enough step back where they're still not one of the 2 best teams in the country. Because if the super team era is dead and Ohio State isn't a super team anymore, then maybe the new version of Ohio State is still good enough to win when there's no other super teams to beat them.
That's the question. I think Georgia's an interesting one this year on that front too, because we're going to have Jake Rowe on next week. We're doing another deep dive week where we do 1 team per day. And so we're going to talk to Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ about Georgia. And we have not said hardly a word about Georgia this offseason. We've just assumed they're going to still be good. We've just assumed that Kirby Smart's got some guys that we know were big-time recruits, and they've just been kind of baking in the oven there, and they're going to come out fully formed now. And they are going to be really good, and Georgia's going to compete for the SEC title and compete for national title. It's not a guarantee.
No. What if Georgia is just the same team they were last year?
Right, which would be a good team. They did win the SEC championship.
Really good team that wins the SEC but doesn't scare anybody like they used to. Yeah. Or they might be awesome. But I still think that it's very within certainty that they'll probably make the playoff this year.
We'll see. All right, let's see who else do we have on this list. We have several SEC teams, but I'll throw a couple more in the capable of it category, ceiling category, but they've got the stars have to align.
Okay.
Florida,
absolutely.
Stars have to align. But if DJ Lagway is as good as we think he is, maybe the stars can align his junior year if things go well. We'll see. Or
is interesting about Florida. Sorry, Andy. I know you're in the middle of
Go ahead.
I interrupted you a lot today. I'm sorry. The Windows thing is interesting because if we go under the assumption that there are no more super teams and that you don't have to be loaded at 9 different positions to win a national title now, then inversely, having the best quarterback in the country will carry more weight than it used to.
Right. And so if he's as good as we think he might be, there's a very good chance that their window opens up briefly. And then they've got to you have to do everything else right. And I mean, well, okay, let me ask this question. Does South Carolina qualify for that? With Lenora Sellers, who we think is a great quarterback.
in terms of this
Or
coming
do they
year
not have the
next
pieces
year?
around him?
Do you think that South Carolina has a national championship ceiling is the question.
I don't right now.
I don't either.
But I feel like they kind of need the same things to go right that Florida would need. Like Florida's not like a guaranteed, even if DJ Lagway is as good as we think, a lot of other things would have to happen for Florida to be able to win a national title.
Yeah, Florida also has like 2 5-star receivers coming up, and I don't know if South Carolina is in that category yet.
Right, right. That's the other piece of it.
Dallas
yeah.
Wilson could be one of the stars of the sport by August.
But the thing about Florida that's interesting is their offensive and defensive lines are very old. Like,
yeah,
this may be the year for them, and they don't even realize it yet.
Yeah, South Carolina has this maybe the best or second best defensive player in the country on their team, and Florida doesn't have that. So that, but like for me, like if I'm gonna buy stock in a team's ability to reach the highest of highs, like I think Florida and South Carolina are ultimately pretty similar coming into this year in terms of like things go right, they could be very good. If things go bad, they could be bad. But like in terms of like buying stock for the next decade, like my money would go to Florida.
Here's another one in the SEC that I find very interesting. Tennessee made the playoff last year. They've done very well under Josh Heupel. We're expecting a step back this year, but could Tennessee, given the way it's approached the NIL era, given the way Heupel's coached since he's gotten there, could Tennessee be one of those teams over the next 10 years?
I think in theory, yes. I think
so,
Tennessee.
So Texas A&M, Tennessee, kind of the same. That same.
Yeah, I think I would probably put A&M slightly ahead, but I think I have A&M brain. Like, you know how high I put A&M in my like jobs list. Like maybe it's
well, you know, I feel like the A&M thing is like supernatural at this point. Like there is some sort of somebody put like a voodoo hex on Texas A&M.
So I
70 years ago, and it's still going.
I really struggle with A&M because of my cult to Aggie wife. Just kidding. I don't even know if she can name the head coach of the team. But what I do know is that I am infatuated with their 2022 class and the fact that they were able to assemble it. Now, the part is we know how that went, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that class was a complete fugazi in that they actually weren't the best class in the country and that they I mean, you were part of that.
Well, they weren't because there was no balance to it. Like it was.
But also the players didn't, even if there were no balance, like most of the players in that class turned out to not be productive in college. Like one of their best players is Denver Harris, and he just wasn't the type of player that you want to bring into your program. But like, should I look back at the 22 class and go as evidence of look what A&M can do, or am I being fooled by that? That's the thing that I don't
think you should look at the 2022 class at A&M as an indicator of anything good.
Okay, so you don't think you should look back at the 2022 class and go, A&M can go sign 18 top 100 players in a given cycle at any given time, and we just don't know it? Or do they don't get credit for signing 18 top 100 players in one cycle?
No, because it was a bad mix of players.
It was a bad mix of players.
I give you credit if you sign a bunch of good players that play well in college.
I know. We got into this discussion with Ralph Russo in text, but it's like, if you could, I would try again. If you could get 18 top 100 players, like that's a dice roll that I think I would take more than once.
Well, it just depends. Are you taking them just because of where they ranked? Because there were guys in that class who I'm sure if you were recruiting them and had multiple contacts with them, their families, their high school coaches, all the stuff you do during the recruiting process, that you knew there were some red flags.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's,
and you don't need to take that. Like some of those players who raised the rating of the class, if you didn't take them, you might have had a better class.
And there was reporting at The Athletic before we left. I can't remember if you helped the reporting.
It was me and Sam Kahn.
You did it too, right? Andy has done so many good stories, I can't even just keep track anymore. But in the story, there were quotes in reporting that they were taking players because of their ranking, which is awful. So
No,
like,
and A&M's not the only one guilty of that. There have been other schools. I remember,
I know, but
yeah, like Florida during the Jim McElwain era would throw a couple on at the end that were highly ranked that had whatever issues and weren't going to a school that you'd think they'd be going to based on their ranking, and they suddenly show up in the class, and it's like,
okay,
you're right, class.
Taking players with issues, like I'm okay with that. Because I think there's two ways of looking at it. It's like, oh, this kid's an asshole. He's never going to be good. Or I'm a coach of a college program. I want to be good at football, and also I can help this young man.
It's like the fine line is, can your culture turn that red flag into a productive player, or do you take so many red flags that becomes your culture?
Right. Or do you have to have a culture to speak of to begin with? Because I think A&M didn't have a culture at all.
They didn't really have it. Yeah, exactly.
So, like, maybe Georgia would be a better place to take somebody with a red flag than you don't build with red flags. You plant them.
And I'd be curious. This is one I don't think Kirby Smart would ever say all this publicly, but I would love to hear Kirby Smart or maybe Nick Saban would, now that he's out of it, because I imagine they had kind of a governor in their mind of, I'm willing to take a risk on this player because they're that talented, but I'm not going to take 3 of these. I'm only going to take 1 of these or 2 of these. Like, what is the number or the limit, or how do you keep that chemistry right? Because yes, there are players you can take who are potential red flags, who put in the right situation will become very productive and are not going to give you problems.
And might be just become a better person.
Decide.
Yeah, I think what you do is you have a beautiful house, and you get flowers for the front of your house that might be semi-poisonous as like an accent mark, but it's not going to ruin your house. You don't build your entire garden out of it, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's a terrible.
I think that's a good example. I think that's a good analogy.
What was the flower from Breaking Bad, Lily of the Valley? You might want one of those in your yard, but you don't just plant them everywhere. Like, I think that's. Yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know. But like the fact that it's just like, I get confused with A&M because I know in theory they could sign a class with 12 top 100 players in it. And even if you got rid of 6 red flags out of that class, that would still be the number 1 class in the country. And like, I don't know that we've seen Tennessee do that, though we have seen Tennessee weaponize NIL better than anyone else. And they have gotten good players. So like, I'm kind of torn with this discussion. I think they're both in the same bucket. I don't know if it's even important to make a distinction. On who's
we also have to throw out the possibility of a random Auburn one, because that always feels like
there's always a random Auburn one in there somewhere. Yeah. There's a few teams not in the SEC though that we have to. I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, are there any other Big Ten teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to. One of those 2 teams that I thought we had to discuss would be USC. Like, what do you think of that?
There we go. Well, we're looking at the class they were putting together now. Currently, number 1 in the On3 industry team rankings. Now, as everybody has pointed out, they have 30 commits. It's a much bigger class than everybody else right now, and that's why they're number 1. But they're probably going to be in the top 5 if all these guys stick. So if this is what it's going to be like from now on, then I would feel more comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable putting them in there right now just based on the first 3 years of Lincoln Riley.
A decade is a long time and a short time.
Yeah.
They are definitely in the they could category for me, not the will category.
Right.
And there's another program.
The pieces are there. The resources seem to be there, but they've got to figure out how to put it together.
Now let's take a quick flight to the East Coast.
Okay.
A program that I think might be similar, and that's Miami. We didn't talk about Miami.
That's a good one.
Miami is a place that has shown that it can acquire a lot of talent.
Mm-hmm. In both ways, not just through the portal, and not just through high school recruiting, but both. And what did I say about Notre Dame? Miami is a similar version to what I said about Notre Dame. If you are going to have a calling card, having a really good offensive line as your calling card is a great place to start.
So Miami also too. And sorry, Canes fans, it sucks, but I legitimately think that their offense was generationally good last year. Like, I would put Miami's offense in the same bucket as the Jaden Daniels LSU offense of teams that were just torpedoed by bad D. But like, I think if Miami would have beaten Cuse, or they would have had just slightly better defense, they would have gotten over the hump a year ago, and we would be viewing them as a program very differently. Now it's up to Mario.
If they've beaten Syracuse, they play for the ACC title. They probably end up going to the playoff, whether they win the ACC title or not. They probably both them and SMU would have gone. And I don't know that Miami's defense was good enough for them to make a run in the playoff last year, but the offense certainly was.
I mean, there were games where we're watching Miami and the other team was just up and down the field the entire, like they had no chance to stop them.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not trying to put salt in the wound, but what I do want to do is make an illustration that Miami was a much closer team to being elite last year than people are giving them credit for. And maybe that's maybe you'll disagree with that and say, well, their defense was so bad they weren't close at all. And I'm not going to push back at that, but they put together an offense last year that was one of the top 10 units of the last decade, right? In terms of just pure offense. And hell, they were signature away from getting Jeremiah Smith into that mix. Again, I'm not trying to be the merchant of death for you Miami fans listening, but like, I think that they deserve to be in the could category.
They definitely do. And it's if the defense is improved, I don't think they take a huge step back in terms of how good they are and how close they can get to making the playoff or making the playoff. I think they could contend for a playoff berth or make a playoff this year.
Yeah.
Even if the offense isn't as good, but because the defense is so much better. Vance in the chat says, would BYU be considered out of nowhere in 10 years? And I think we can expand this to any non-Big Ten SEC team. Do we think any non-Big Ten SEC team has a chance? I don't.
I got one.
Okay.
What about Colorado in the could?
I don't think they can put the roster together. Maybe.
They are the team that I think has the highest likelihood of assembling a roster that's good enough. Whether or not I believe that, I think that Dion, if he turns it on, has the goods to put together a good enough team to run that conference and to make a run in the playoff.
That's the thing. Putting together a team good enough to run that conference is a different level of team than you need to get through the playoff.
But if they could make the playoff 5 years out of 10, all it takes.
What about Arizona State? Could they do that?
I'm closer on Colorado than Arizona State.
I think the Dion factor allows you to get.
Yeah.
If he just decides I'm going to go ham on high school recruiting. Still, I don't know. I don't know that they have the NIL capabilities or we'll see. I mean, the rev share era, we don't know how that's going to look yet. We really don't. Everybody has some money now, and I think that does change the math.
Have a conversation on the show like a few weeks ago about how many elite players do you have to have on your team to win a national title, and we were like somewhere between 7 and 11 when it used to be like 15 to 20.
Yeah.
I think that Colorado has the highest likelihood of having 7 to 11 in the Big 12. Is that fair?
And they had the best player in the country last year.
Yeah.
So
and it's the same thing that we saw in the chat when we were talking about Miami. People were like, well, how much of that was Cam Ward? It doesn't matter. They got him. That's the point. Like getting the player that's good is the point. So, but yes, so we're on the fringes here. And I don't know if we're forgetting anybody. Maybe like Florida State fans will be upset. I don't know if that's another team that we have to.
I mean, Florida State could certainly, if they get back to where they should be, they can certainly be in the can group. And then you got to put it all together.
Yeah.
But it's been a while since they were really elite recruiters out of high school.
Yeah.
Which I think you have to be.
I'm looking at just a whole list of the Power Five to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody obvious or somebody who deserves to be in this discussion.
I mean, you've got programs in the Big Ten that have had good years or been good or could be good, but like Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, but I just don't know that they could put together a stacked enough roster to get through what the playoff is now.
You know, one team that we haven't mentioned at all.
Okay,
Oklahoma.
I think Oklahoma can. Oklahoma can. They absolutely can build a deep enough team. That's just a matter of do they have the right people in place to do that? We're going to find out. Like this year's going to be a really, really interesting one at Oklahoma.
Yep. But I think we covered everybody. If we would have gotten through the show without even saying Oklahoma, then they would have gone crazy.
Yeah, that would have been a mistake on our part. Yeah. Yes, Oklahoma absolutely can do that. So, yeah, that's a lot of teams we've mentioned, and I really hope. Oh, Washington.
Yeah, I said Washington.
We mentioned Washington as in they played for the national title, but Washington's a team that in this new era. Who knows? If Oregon can do this, Washington can do this too.
Yeah, and if you take the Michigan did it 2 years ago as like a reason to put them pretty high, then you can't ignore the fact that Washington played them. What about Tech? Texas
Tech. They're spending money for sure. I think we need to see what they do this year with the money they spent. Like if they take this investment and they suddenly become the best program in the Big 12, well, they do have donors that could keep them invested similarly.
Yeah.
So
the thing that's hard about this conversation is that just because somebody spent a bunch of money 1 year doesn't mean that they're going to be doing it on an ongoing basis. Like what if Texas Tech decides they want to do what they just did this year every year? Then eventually they probably would, have a team that can make a run.
Isn't that Oregon?
Yeah, and Oregon's on my will list.
Yeah. So
Oregon
I think this is sort of an experimental year for Texas Tech. Like they did it, they're going to see how it goes, and then if it goes well, then maybe they do it again. So we'll find out.
It was a good show. A little argument in there.
We got one more thing. Something to fire you up.
I'm gonna get fired up.
EA Sports ranked the 25 toughest stadiums to play in the new video game that is coming out next month. So EA Sports College Football 26, they revealed the 25 toughest places to play. Last year, Kyle Field topped the list. It's way down this year. I'm kind of curious. Have they been studying you and I and all of our various rankings in terms of like rage bait? Because I feel like this is rage bait.
How much could possibly
Tiger Stadium at number 1, LSU, I have no problem with. It is an incredibly intimidating environment. Beaver Stadium at number 2, also no problem with. But the fact that the place you had at number 1 last year is now number 11 when nothing appreciably changed, like that's bait.
I think they maybe took my first trip to Kyle Field as reason for this. I was disappointed by it because I know we didn't get their best showing. And maybe part of the reason why is because the game was just like they weren't in it for most of it. And that's like you didn't get the highest. But for the magnitude of the Texas A&M Texas return at night with a trip to the SEC championship on the line, like I was disappointed by. Like I was in awe of the size of it and the way people showed up, but like it wasn't as loud as I thought it would be.
Yeah, and if they hadn't lost to Auburn right before that, I think it would have been a different vibe. But I think that was like, oh no, now we're never going to beat Texas.
If A&M scored first or something, like if the game would have gone differently, like the game was in question, but the game was not really in question for most of it.
Yeah, the A&M kept making good defensive plays, but you just knew that their offense wasn't going to cash them in.
And the thing that is just so funny to me about this entire discussion, as somebody who went to every single home game on the number 3 teams list for a decade, is it ebbs and flows. Like there are a lot. Like I think you could make the case that Ohio Stadium is very quiet at times for the size and magnitude of it. But if they play a big game or they're having a huge season, it changes. So it's like when you say who's got the most intimidating thing, the people that go to the games change. I just don't even know how it's a consistent thing. Like a Sanford.
Well, I actually think it should vary. Like if you're in dynasty mode, obviously in dynasty mode, you get several years out. Like the results stop matching what we see in the current year. Like it should change. So, for example, like Penn State, if they are having a down year, if they're 4-4 and you go play them in November and they're 4-4, then the crowd should be more subdued than if you played them in a whiteout when they're 7-1. Like I feel like they should program the game that way. It should be dependent on how things are in the team's season.
Yeah, I mean, there were times where I've been in Ohio Stadium where it was like my ears are bleeding, and there are times where like, is there anybody here? And I'm sure that's true for everybody, you know. And
Yeah,
obviously start time.
The Swamp's a great example. Last year, like you and I were there when it was deathly quiet,
like a funeral
against Miami.
You know,
and then 2 months later, Ole Miss is there, noon game. Crowd should have been completely asleep. But by the fourth quarter, when the game's in doubt, they're going nuts. Yeah. So it's very dependent on how things are rolling.
Dependent on truly where the student section is and how big it is, because
Penn State being number 2 is a great example, because it fills an entire end zone. It's massive. We mentioned Florida. They cover one side of the sideline. Texas A&M covers a sideline essentially. Like that gives you a higher floor in terms of atmosphere.
Yeah, and some places take care of their students better than others.
Yeah. So, but LSU at number 1, I don't have a problem with. I think LSU when it's rocking is awesome. By the way, Ari, I'm writing my my list of pivot point games for the year. We'll put those out on 3 very soon.
Is A&M on 9 of them?
No, actually they're not, because they are the trap. Like I need to do a trap games column too, and just have every Texas A&M game.
What if we did a trap game column and just presented Texas A&M's schedule?
I think it's not a bad thought. But like, we talk about Tiger Stadium. The first pivot point game I have, because it can't be like a season opener.
Yeah.
The first pivot point game I have of the season is Florida LSU. It is the pivot point for both teams, where things you could take off or you could start going downhill. That night in Baton Rouge is going to be spectacular, because we're guaranteed a meltdown by the losing fan base. Guaranteed.
I've never seen a game at LSU, Andy, and I want to change.
I know. We need to fix that.
Yeah.
We need to fix that.
I want to see. I feel like I've been to Bryant Denny. I've been to Beaver Stadium. I've been to Ohio Stadium. I've been to Michigan Stadium. I've been to Oregon. I feel like I've basically been to just about every place that I've been to Ben Hill. This is the last stadium I think on my list of games where like everybody says it's number 1, and I've never experienced Sanford Stadium either.
Well, you need the tailgating experience at Tiger Stadium as well. Like that's a piece. It's the best tailgating in America. And I know everybody's gonna be like, no, our tailgate. No, it's not. Your tailgating is not as good as Tiger Stadium's. LSU's tailgaters are better than yours. It's not a debate. And if I take you to LSU, you would be like, oh yeah, ours really sucks compared to this.
Yeah, I want to see it. I've never seen it. But yeah, hopefully we have a new collection of teams. I was actually, my wife asked me this the other night. They're like, what games? What started it? We were watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and she goes, I've never been to Provo. And I was like, yeah, I've never been to Provo either.
Full circle. I love when we bring the show full circle.
Yeah. Never been to Provo before. And I was like, neither have I. And honestly, that's one of the places I would love to see a game.
I have been to Provo, but not for a game. Big pizza buffet town. Huge fans of pizza buffets in Provo.
Forget the game. Let's go just for the pizza buffet. But I want, like, there's a difference too between like most intrigued stadiums to go to because you want to know how loud it gets, and just frankly beautiful stadiums. Like in BYU's stadium, and a lot of the stadiums like are just pretty. And like Washington's another one I've never been to.
Washington is gorgeous. Yeah, I love Sun Devil Stadium, carved into the mountain in Tempe. I think that's beautiful too.
And my brother-in-law lives in Salt Lake with his family, and it's just such a beautiful place. Obviously, you're a Park City.
Rice Eccles at Utah, great game day atmosphere, especially night games. Like it's a small stadium, but it is fantastic. And Salt Lake is just a great town. Like if your team plays at Utah and you're trying to find a road trip for the year, that's your road trip. Like go to that game. You'll love it.
Yeah, but I do want to put a button on this and saying that, like, in my experience personally, and again, individual games don't tell the whole story, but the idea that SEC stadiums are unequivocally louder. I think it's probably true from top to bottom, but the top of the Big Ten like rivals them. Like I think that like Penn State.
The difference is Arkansas can be deafening, and Purdue's never going to be deafening.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah, and that's it. That the SEC just has some places like when they're good, it's crazy. And now the cowbells help at Mississippi State.
How's Clemson? I've never been to Clemson either.
Clemson's great. It's loud. Now the way Clemson is built, it's not as loud as it could be. But those grandstands are extremely steep and tall. And so it does hold some noise, and it can get going really well.
Yeah. But super excited for the game, Andy. Can't wait. Played around yesterday, and I was Miami, and I played Georgia, and I just got wrecked again. I got to stop playing with Miami on the game.
You stop playing against people who are playing as Georgia.
No, I know. I mean, you have to, because everybody plays with. You got to play with a top tier team. But I'm really going to focus on my record. I am like, I've played so many games online, Andy. I'm like 365 and 130. So I'm actually really, really good at it. But this year I'm really focused on really, really good record and getting my ranking up.
Well, I cannot wait. July 10th is the release date. I don't know about the toughest stadiums. That's for everyone else to decide. I think that the quality of the defense on the team you're playing has a lot to do with how tough the stadium is. So, yeah, we'll find out. But big day tomorrow, Ari. Our man Cody Belair, national scout for On3 and Rivals. I guess we can say Rivals now. Not official till next week, but Cody's going to join us to play a game of Whose Team Is It Anyway? And you were not with us yet, but last year when we played this game, this is where Cody got on the stump for Sam Leavitt and said, you people do not understand how good Sam Leavitt is going to be at Arizona State. And Cody is absolutely right. So we'll see who he's got this year. Because I said, whoever your Sam Leavitt is this year needs to be on the quiz. So study up, Ari. I'm going to study. Hopefully we don't embarrass ourselves too much. Also, on Friday, dear Andy and dear Ari, you know how much we love when you guys drive the show. Smartest, best looking, most talented listeners and viewers of any show on these internets. Hit us up, AndyStaplesOn3@gmail.com, Ari.Wasserman@on3.com. You can also find us on social media, Andy_Staples on Twitter and Instagram, at Ari Wasserman on Twitter and Instagram. It's going to be beautiful. Get those questions in. We've already got a couple that I love already. So just keep sending them. Folks in the chat, we Willie, Nathan, Steve in San Antonio, you guys always send them. Justin, keep sending them because that's what makes it fun. And if you've never sent a question before, now's the time. Now's the time. We will see you tomorrow.